everyone. My name is Dave Parker. This is Grant McQuilkin, my business partner at ICCG. And we want to talk to you today about transactions, especially when you're selling your business and it involves real estate. We've had a lot of different transactions because we've owned several businesses through the years. And I remember specifically on one of our first businesses, we had an option to buy the property from the family. The previous owner died. We bought the property. We own it to this day. It's been a good move for us. We didn't buy it personally. We bought it in a separate entity, which you can speak about. But when we sold the company, it became really great rental income for us. In fact, we had two pieces of property on that deal. So that's one way, right? And how's it an advantage for a business owner to do that?
Yeah, and I would say, a lot of times the seller doesn't want to sell the real estate right away. We always advise our clients in a lease, possibly get an option to buy, which is what we did on that. And it enables you to purchase it later at a certain, maybe higher price than what it was at the beginning. But owning that real estate as a business owner gives you a lot of flexibility, but you got to be careful not to include it in the same entity as the operations, which is really difficult to separate sometimes when the lenders on the transaction don't want you to separate, right? And so we typically advise people to put it in a separate entity, and then the business rents from that entity and keeps it separate from the operations.
We just did this with a transaction. Isn't this similar to what we did? Yeah. We had a family that a father was. We helped them transfer, basically sell the business to the kids, and the real estate was in the company's name, I believe, but it didn't need to be there. So we moved it out. There was kind of some acrobats we played there. It's really
hard. So, whenever you have a company that has appreciated property inside of it, it becomes a tax nightmare to get that property out of that company and into another wholly owned subsidiary or a company that is owned by that owner. So you can sell the business in this entity, and you have to have good tax advice because that could be an extremely expensive tax bill. Yeah. It really is. But getting that separated allowed him to sell the business to his next gen while keeping the retirement income, the rental income ongoing from the business.
Yeah. One of the strong points of selling the real estate with the business, especially if it's not a really large business, is because if it's within SBA guidelines, SBA loves it when there's assets like land and buildings involved. They really they will forgive a lot of other things, but they love it when they've got assets like that as collateral. So
absolutely, but you have to manage that, right? You want to make sure that the SBA allows you to put it into a separate entity, or put it in an entity that you can take it out of as soon as possible. Buying a business, or even selling a business, we represent sellers most of the time. When you're selling a business and you have property that you also own in a separate entity, negotiating that rent is very important because the higher the rent that you require, the less EBITDA or cash flows in the business, and now the value of the business is lower. Right. And so you got to be careful how you go, what is best, right? Because you might get a 7 multiple on cash flow right here, but you've got rent for a long, long time over here. And so, it's not always a one size fits all. Because
a lot of business owners, they may have an inflated rent because they're paying themselves rent, right? So they're paying it out of their business. And sometimes, a buyer is fine with that as long as it's disclosed up front. Everyone understands it, but it is going to lower the EBITDA at that point.
And, normally, like with us, we were renting from ourselves, basically. And so we had this lease agreement that was basically just us writing on a napkin, right? We had it. It wasn't reviewed by a whole lot of legal advice. We needed it for the bank.
We're not suggesting this.
And we wanted to make sure that it was some sort of legal document to keep it separate for liability purposes. But what we always advise our clients to do is when they do have the opportunity to sell the business and now you have a new tenant that's not related party, you need to make sure that lease agreement is tight.
Right.
And so now you're dealing with all kinds of, EPA paragraphs and things that will protect you and protect the tenant,
right.
I guess. But, it's super important that you redo those lease agreements.
Right. So one thing as a tax professional, I'd like for you to speak to, just to make sure we clarify this. One of the myths out there is that, someone buying my business is going to want to buy the land. That's not so much the case. In fact, there's a lot of private equity groups that don't want to own real estate at all. So we don't find that extremely, a lot. But the other myth is, well, do I really want to hang on to this? But there's really a great retirement play strategy here as long as it's done correctly, right? And that's the last thing I'd like for you to speak to.
Yeah, rent income is great to retire on. Most of our sellers are retirement minded, let's say, right. And it's a monthly income that doesn't, largely sometimes is offset by depreciation and those kinds of things. There is a future capital gain, which is a lower tax liability north of what you've depreciated. And so all of those technical terms result in real estate has always been a good investment for commercial property purposes, single tenant commercial property. There's always a market for it. Yeah. Of course, there are exceptions, but as long as you manage it, purposefully with a triple net lease where the repairs and maintenance and insurance and taxes are the responsibility of the tenant, then you're sitting with a monthly check that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, that's great. We hope you found this helpful. We look forward to talking with you next time.
Hey, thanks for joining Grant, Dave, and the rest of our team today. My name is Andrew, and I'm with the business development side of ICCG. If you have any questions or want to talk to somebody on our team, please visit our website, follow the directions there. I'll most likely be the one to respond, so look forward to hearing from you. Before you go, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.